The gunshot echoed off the wooden boards of the saloon's back wall, and Adelaide Hayes swore under her breath as she missed the empty whiskey bottle for the fourth time in a row. Dust kicked up from where the bullet struck the hard, packed earth, and she squeezed her eyes shut against the frustration building in her chest. It was 1878, and women who could handle a pistol earned respect in Arizona territory, something she desperately needed if she was going to survive out here alone. Her father had taught her the basics before he died 3 months ago, leaving her the small homestead 10 miles outside Quartzsite with nothing but debts, and a warning that the land was unforgiving to those who could not defend themselves. Adelaide had sold almost everything to pay what was owed, keeping only her father's old Colt revolver and the clothes on her back. At 22 years old, she found herself working nights serving drinks at the Silver Dollar Saloon, saving every penny to keep the homestead from slipping through her fingers entirely. But serving drinks would not protect her from the men who eyed her property with greedy interest, or the raiders who sometimes swept through the territory looking for easy targets. She raised the pistol again, trying to remember how her father had positioned his shoulders, the way he had told her to breathe out slowly before squeezing the trigger. The weight of the Colt felt awkward in her grip, and when she fired again, the recoil nearly knocked her backward. The bottle remained stubbornly intact. "Your stance is all wrong." Adelaide spun around, the pistol jerking up instinctively toward the voice. A man stood about 15 feet away, his hands raised slightly in a peaceful gesture. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of whiskey in lamplight. A dusty brown Stetson shadowed his face, and he wore the typical gear of a working cowboy, trail-worn denim and leather chaps marked with the evidence of long days in the saddle. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the holster tied down in a way that suggested he knew exactly how to use it. "I did not mean to startle you," he said, his voice carrying a hint of Texas drawl. "But you are going to break your wrist if you keep shooting like that." Adelaide lowered the pistol slightly, but kept it pointed in his general direction. She recognized him vaguely from the saloon, one of the cowboys who worked the cattle ranches that sprawled across the territory. He had been in a few times over the past weeks, always quiet, always alone. "I am managing just fine on my own." "Are you?" He glanced at the bottle, still sitting undisturbed on the fence post 20 yards away. "Because from where I am standing, that bottle looks pretty confident about its chances." Heat flooded her cheeks, but Adelaide refused to look away. "If you came back here to mock me, you can turn right around and leave. I came back here because I heard shooting and wanted to make sure nobody was in trouble." He took a step closer, his hand still visible and empty. "Name's Xander Frost. I work the Barrett Ranch north of town." She studied him for a long moment, weighing whether to trust him. There was something steady in his gaze, something that reminded her of the good men her father had respected. Finally, she lowered the pistol completely. "Adelaide Hayes, Miss Hayes." He touched the brim of his hat. "I know you from the saloon. You served me beer 2 nights ago." "I serve a lot of men beer," she said, though she did remember him now. He had been polite, left a decent tip, and had not tried to grab her the way some of the others did. "I am sure you do." Xander gestured toward the bottle. "But if you are serious about learning to shoot, you need someone to show you proper form. You are holding that Colt like you expect it to bite you." Adelaide looked down at the pistol in her hand. "My father tried to teach me before he died, but there was never enough time." Something shifted in Xander's expression, a softening around the eyes. "I am sorry about your father. I heard he was a good man." "He was." She swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. "He left me the homestead, but I cannot keep it if I cannot defend it." Xander was quiet for a moment, then he stepped closer, moving slowly so as not to spook her. "May I?" He gestured toward the pistol. Adelaide hesitated, then handed it over. Xander checked the chambers with practiced efficiency, his movements economical and sure. "This is a good gun," he said. "Well maintained. Your father took care of it." "He took care of everything," Adelaide said softly. Xander handed the pistol back to her, handle first. "All right, Miss Hayes. First thing you need to understand is that a gun is a tool, nothing more. It does not have feelings, and it does not care whether you hit your target, but it will respond to how you treat it." He moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him in the late afternoon sun. "Now raise the pistol and show me your natural stance." Adelaide lifted the Colt, trying to position herself the way she had been doing. Xander made a low sound in his throat. "See, that's the problem right there. You are all tension, like you are expecting a fight. Your shoulders are up around your ears, and you are leaning back instead of into the shot." "I do not want the recoil to knock me over," Adelaide admitted. "It would not if you distributed your weight properly." Xander moved behind her, and she felt his presence like a physical thing, warm and solid. "May I?" he asked again, and when she nodded, his hands came to rest lightly on her shoulders. "First, drop these. You are not lifting the gun, you are aiming it. There's a difference." His touch was gentle but firm, pressing her shoulders down and back. Adelaide felt her muscles resist for a moment, then slowly release. "That's better," Xander murmured. "Now shift your left foot forward just a bit. Yes, like that. You want to be balanced but stable, ready to absorb the recoil instead of fighting it." He stepped around to her side, his hand coming to rest briefly on her lower back. "See how you are leaning away? That is your body trying to protect itself, but it is making everything worse. Lean forward just a fraction, like you are pressing into the shot." Adelaide adjusted her posture, feeling the difference immediately. She felt more grounded, less like the gun was something happening to her and more like she was in control of it. "Good," Xander said, and there was approval in his voice. "Now let's talk about your grip. You are strangling that poor colt. Loosen up a bit." "If I loosen my grip, I will drop it," Adelaide protested. "No, you would not. Here." He moved behind her again, and this time his hands came to rest over hers on the pistol grip. His touch was warm and calloused, the hands of a man who worked for a living. "Feel that. You want firm but not rigid. The gun needs to be able to move just a little in your hands, absorb some of that recoil. If you lock everything up tight, all that force goes straight into your wrists and shoulders." Adelaide was acutely aware of how close he was standing, the way his chest almost brushed her back, the scent of leather and sage and something else that was distinctly him. She forced herself to focus on what he was teaching her. "Like this, exactly like that." His voice was low, almost intimate. "Now let's talk about breathing. Most people hold their breath when they shoot, but that makes you tense. You want to breathe naturally, then exhale about halfway and squeeze the trigger at the bottom of your breath. Your body is most stable then." Adelaide nodded, trying to concentrate on her breathing instead of the way Xander's hands still rested over hers. "All right. Pick your target. Focus on it. Everything else fades away until it is just you and that bottle." His voice had taken on an almost meditative quality. "See it. Really see it. Notice the shape, the way the light hits the glass. That bottle is the only thing that exists." Adelaide stared at the whiskey bottle, forcing everything else out of her mind. "The bottle, just the bottle. Now breathe," Xander said softly. "In, out, halfway, hold." Adelaide felt her lungs empty halfway, felt that moment of perfect stillness. "Squeeze," Xander whispered. She squeezed the trigger and the colt barked. The bottle exploded in a shower of glass. Adelaide gasped, lowering the pistol as excitement flooded through her. I hit it. I actually hit it. Xander stepped back, and she turned to see a smile spreading across his face. It transformed him completely, erasing the hard lines of sun and work and revealing something younger and warmer underneath. You did more than hit it. You obliterated it. That was a perfect shot. That was you, Adelaide said, breathless. Your hands were on mine. My hands were barely touching yours, Xander corrected. That shot was all you, Miss Hayes. I just helped you get out of your own way. Adelaide looked down at the pistol in her hands with new respect. Could you show me again? I need to make sure I can do it on my own. Xander's smile widened. I have got a better idea. There is still enough daylight for a proper lesson. You have any more bottles? Over the next hour, Xander put Adelaide through her paces, setting up bottles and cans at varying distances, correcting her form when she started to slip back into old habits, teaching her how to reload quickly and efficiently. He was patient and thorough, and by the time the sun started to sink toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, Adelaide was hitting her targets more often than not. You are a natural, Xander said as she shattered another bottle. Most people take weeks to get where you are right now. Adelaide lowered the pistol, her arm aching pleasantly from the extended practice. I have good motivation to learn. The homestead, Xander said, and it was not a question, among other things. Adelaide looked at him properly for the first time since they had started the lesson. His face was honest and open, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often and meant it when he did. There was strength in the set of his jaw, but also gentleness in the way he watched her, like she was something worth paying attention to. Why did you help me? Most men would have just laughed and walked away. Xander was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the desert sunset. My sister Rachel would have been about your age now if she had lived. She died 5 years back, caught cholera on the wagon train when my family was moving out here. She was tough as nails. That girl wanted to learn everything, do everything. My father would not teach her to shoot because he said it was not ladylike. He looked back at Adelaide, and there was old pain in his eyes. Maybe if he had, she would have been able to protect herself when trouble found her. I know it is not rational, but I guess I figure if I can help someone else's daughter or sister learn to defend themselves, maybe it balances the scales a little. Adelaide felt her heart twist. I am sorry about Rachel. Me too. Xander cleared his throat, pushing aside the memories. But she would have liked you, I think. She had that same stubborn set to her jaw when she was determined to do something. Are you saying I look stubborn? Adelaide asked, but there was no heat in it. I am saying you look determined, Xander corrected with a hint of his earlier smile. There is a difference. The sound of raised voices drifted from the front of the saloon and Adelaide sighed. I should get inside. My shift starts soon. When do you practice again? Xander asked. Adelaide blinked. I had not thought that far ahead. I suppose whenever I can find the time. You need regular practice if you want to maintain what you learned today, Xander said. How about I meet you here tomorrow, same time? We can work on your draw speed and target acquisition. I cannot pay you, Adelaide said quickly. Xander shook his head. I am not asking for payment. Consider it a favor between neighbors. Besides, he added with a crooked grin, I need the practice too. Can't let my skills get rusty. Adelaide studied him, looking for any sign of ulterior motives, but his expression remained open and genuine. Finally, she nodded. All right, tomorrow, same time. But Xander. Yes, thank you, truly, you did not have to do this. Maybe not, Xander agreed. But I wanted to, that counts for something, does not it? Adelaide found herself smiling despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. It counts for a lot. She walked back into the saloon through the rear door, tucking the Colt into the pocket of her skirt. The main room was already filling up with the evening crowd, cowboys and miners and drifters, all looking to forget their troubles at the bottom of a glass. Adelaide tied her apron on and began her rounds, but she found her mind drifting back to the man behind the saloon, the patient way he had guided her hands, the warmth in his voice when he had talked about his sister. The next evening, Adelaide hurried through her chores at the homestead, feeding the chickens and the single milk cow she had managed to keep, checking the fence lines for damage. The property was modest, just 10 acres of scrubland with a small house her father had built with his own hands, but it was hers. She would do whatever it took to keep it. Xander was already waiting when she arrived behind the saloon, and Adelaide felt an unexpected flutter in her chest at the sight of him. He had set up a row of targets, cans this time instead of bottles, and was checking his own pistol with the ease of long practice. "Punctual," he said approvingly when he saw her. "That is a good quality in a student. Who says I am your student?" Adelaide challenged. "You do by showing up." He gestured toward the targets. "Ready to get started." Over the next 2 weeks, Xander met Adelaide behind the saloon almost every evening. He taught her how to draw smoothly from a hip holster, how to shoot while moving, how to clear a jam when the mechanism stuck. He showed her how to read a man's body language to anticipate when he was about to draw, and how to position herself for the best advantage in a confrontation. More than that, he taught her confidence, the sure knowledge that she could protect herself if the need arose. They talked while they practiced, conversations that ranged from the practical to the personal. Adelaide learned that Xander was 26, that he had been working ranches since he was 14, that he dreamed of having his own spread someday but lacked the capital to make it happen. Xander learned that Adelaide had grown up in St. Louis, that her mother had died when she was young, that she had come west with her father chasing the dream of cheap land and freedom from the crowded city. "You miss it?" Xander asked one evening as they cleaned their pistols side by side on an old wooden crate. "St. Louis, I mean." Adelaide considered the question. "Sometimes. I miss the libraries and the theaters, the way you could walk down a street and hear 5 different languages being spoken. But I do not miss the smoke and the noise or the way everyone was always in such a hurry." She ran an oiled cloth along the barrel of her Colt. "Out here you can breathe. You can see the stars at night. That is worth something." "It is worth a lot," Xander agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "You are good company, Adelaide. I hope you know that." She looked up, startled by the sudden sincerity in his voice. "So are you." Their eyes met and held, and Adelaide felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. Xander was the first to look away, clearing his throat and returning his attention to his pistol. "We should work on your accuracy at distance tomorrow. That is where most people struggle." "All right," Adelaide said softly, wondering if he felt it too, this strange new tension humming between them. The weather turned hot as June arrived, the desert sun beating down relentlessly during the day. Adelaide began bringing a canteen of water to their evening sessions, and Xander would sometimes produce a flask of cool tea that he had prepared at the ranch. They would sit in the shade of the saloon's back wall between rounds of practice, shoulder to shoulder, sharing the flask and talking about everything and nothing. One evening, after Adelaide had successfully hit 8 targets in a row, Xander let out a low whistle. "You are better than half the cowboys I know now, maybe better than 3/4 of them." Adelaide reloaded her pistol with the smooth efficiency he had taught her. "Good. That means I can defend the homestead if anyone tries something." Xander's expression grew serious. "Is someone trying something? Because if they are, you need to tell me." "Not yet," Adelaide admitted. "But there is a man named Briggs who has been sniffing around. He owns the land to the south of mine, and he has made it clear he would like to own mine too. He has been in the saloon a few times making comments about how a woman alone cannot possibly manage a property, how it would be better for everyone if I just sold to him and moved back east. Briggs. Xander's jaw tightened. I know him. He is the type who thinks money and land give him the right to do whatever he wants. Has he threatened you directly? Not in so many words, Adelaide said. But there is an implication underneath everything he says, like he is warning me that bad things could happen to a woman alone out there. Xander stood abruptly, pacing a few steps away before turning back. You should not be alone at the homestead. It is too isolated. If Briggs decided to make a move, no one would hear you call for help. I do not have a choice, Adelaide said, frustration sharpening her words. I cannot afford to hire anyone, and I certainly cannot abandon the property. It is all I have left of my father. I know that, Xander said, running a hand through his hair. I just hate the thought of you out there by yourself, worrying about what might happen. The raw concern in his voice made Adelaide's breath catch. I will be all right. You have taught me well. Xander crossed back to her, and suddenly he was very close, closer than he had been since that first day when he had helped adjust her stance. Adelaide, he said, and her name sounded different in his mouth now, weighted with something she was afraid to name. I need you to promise me something. What? If Briggs or anyone else threatens you, you send word to me immediately. The Barrett Ranch is only a few hours' ride from your place. I can be there quickly if you need me. I cannot ask you to do that, Adelaide protested. You have your own responsibilities. You are not asking, I am offering. His eyes searched hers. Please, Adelaide, for my own peace of mind. She should say no. She should maintain her independence, prove that she could handle everything alone. But the truth was, it felt good to know someone cared whether she was safe. Good to have someone she could call on if the worst happened. All right, she said finally. If I need help, I will send word. Some of the tension left Xander's shoulders. Thank you. They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken things. Finally, Adelaide stepped back, breaking the spell. It is getting late. I need to get ready for my shift. Right, of course. Xander gathered up the empty cans, stuffing them in a burlap sack. Same time tomorrow. Same time tomorrow, Adelaide confirmed. As she walked into the saloon, Adelaide could feel Xander's eyes on her back, warm as the setting sun. She told herself the shiver that ran down her spine was just from the temperature change, as she moved from the heat outside to the relative cool of the building's interior. She told herself it had nothing to do with the way her heart had started racing when he had said her name, nothing to do with the part of her that wanted to turn around and walk back to him, to see what would happen if she closed the distance between them instead of maintaining it. The saloon was crowded that night, and Adelaide threw herself into the work, trying to outrun her own thoughts. But when she finally made it home in the early hours of the morning, exhausted and smelling of tobacco smoke and spilled beer, she found her mind drifting back to Xander as she drifted off to sleep. She dreamed of his hands on hers, guiding her aim, and woke with her heart pounding and her sheets tangled around her legs. The following week brought a new development. Adelaide was practicing her draw speed, trying to beat her personal best time when a familiar voice called out from the corner of the building. Well, would you look at that? Little Adelaide playing with guns. She turned to find Briggs standing there, a sneer on his fleshy face. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, dressed in clothes that were too fine for quartzite, his pale hands soft from a life without manual labor. Two men flanked him, ranch hands by the look of them, hard-eyed and dangerous. Mr. Briggs, Adelaide said coolly, her hand still resting on the butt of her pistol. Can I help you with something? Just admiring your dedication, Briggs said, moving closer. His men stayed where they were, but their presence was a clear threat. Though I have to wonder why you are wasting your time. Woman like you should not be concerning herself with guns and homesteads. You should find yourself a husband, let him take care of things. I am perfectly capable of taking care of things myself, Adelaide said. Are you? Briggs gestured expansively. Because from where I stand, you are playing at ranching. You have no livestock to speak of, no real crops, no way to make that land profitable. You are just holding on to it out of stubbornness. It is my land, Adelaide said flatly. For now. Briggs's smile did not reach his eyes. But property taxes come due soon, do they not? And I hear you are still paying off your father's debts. That is a lot of weight on young shoulders. Ice slid down Adelaide's spine. How do you know about my father's debts? I make it my business to know things, Briggs said. Same way I know you work nights at the saloon because you cannot make enough off the homestead to survive. Same way I know you are about 3 months away from losing everything. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Which is why I am making you this offer. $300 for your land, cash money right now. You could pay off the debts, have enough left over to start fresh somewhere else. That land is worth twice that, and you know it, Adelaide said. Maybe to someone who could develop it properly, Briggs agreed. But to you, right now, it is worth exactly what I am offering because I am the only one offering anything at all. Adelaide's hand tightened on her pistol, but she forced herself to keep her voice level. I am not selling. Not to you, not to anyone. Briggs's expression hardened. That is a mistake, Miss Hayes. A property like yours, isolated like it is, anything could happen. Could be a fire. Could be your well gets fouled. Could be trouble from raiders or renegades. Terrible things happen to people who do not have the resources to protect themselves. Is that a threat? The words came from behind Briggs, and Adelaide's heart leaped. Xander stepped around the corner of the saloon, his hand resting casually on his own pistol. But there was nothing casual about his eyes, which had gone cold and hard as flint. Briggs turned, his face flushing. This does not concern you, Cowboy. I am making it concern me, Xander said, moving to stand beside Adelaide. Miss Hayes is under my protection. Anyone who has a problem with her has a problem with me. Your protection, Briggs laughed, but it sounded forced. What are you, her bodyguard? I am her friend, Xander said quietly, and I take that seriously. Briggs looked between them, his calculating gaze taking in the way Xander stood slightly in front of Adelaide, the protective angle of his body. I see. Well, that is interesting. He refolded the paper and tucked it back in his jacket. My offer stands, Miss Hayes. You have until the end of the month to think it over. After that, the price goes down. Way down. He turned and walked away, his men falling in behind him. Adelaide waited until they had disappeared around the front of the saloon before letting out a shaky breath. You all right? Xander asked, his hand coming to rest lightly on her shoulder. I am fine, just angry. Adelaide holstered her pistol with more force than necessary. That man makes my skin crawl. He should, Xander said grimly. That was absolutely a threat, even if he tried to dress it up as concern. Adelaide, you need to be careful. Briggs is not the type to take no for an answer gracefully. I know. Adelaide pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling a headache building. But what choice do I have? If I sell to him, I lose everything. If I do not, he might try to force me off the land anyway. Not if you have help, Xander said. Adelaide, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, seeing the determination written there. I meant what I said about being your friend, Xander continued, and friends help each other. What if I came out to the homestead a few times a week, just to help with the heavier work, make sure everything is secure? Briggs would think twice about trying anything if he knew you had someone checking in regularly. Xander, I cannot ask you to do that. You already spend your evenings teaching me to shoot. You have your own job to worry about. The boss at Barrett Ranch owes me about 100 favors, Xander said. I have been covering shifts for other cowboys for 3 years without asking for anything in return. It is time I collected. I can arrange my schedule so I have a few free days each week. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Please let me do this. I will not be able to sleep knowing you are out there alone with that vulture circling. Adelaide wanted to refuse. She had been taking care of herself for months now, proving she did not need anyone else. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of being scared. Tired of shouldering everything alone. Tired of lying awake at night listening to every creak and rustle, wondering if this was the night Briggs made his move. And more than that, she realized she wanted Xander around. Not just for protection, but because she had come to treasure their time together, the easy way they talked, the comfortable silences that sometimes fell between them. All right, she said finally, but only if you let me feed you. I cannot pay you in money, but I can at least provide a decent meal. Xander's face lit up with that transformative smile. Adelaide Hayes, you have yourself a deal. They shook on it, and Adelaide felt the warmth of his hand long after he had let go. True to his word, Xander began showing up at Adelaide's homestead 3 times a week. He would arrive in the early afternoon, his horse loaded with tools and supplies, and set to work on whatever needed doing. He repaired the sagging fence line that Adelaide had been meaning to fix for weeks. He replaced several rotted boards on the porch. He cleaned out the well and built a proper cover for it so nothing could contaminate the water. He worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent his whole life solving practical problems, and Adelaide found herself watching him more often than was probably appropriate. She cooked for him in return, simple meals made from what little she had, beans and cornbread and occasionally a chicken when she could spare one. Xander ate like every meal was a feast, always complimenting her cooking, always helping with the dishes afterward. They would sit on the porch in the evening, watching the sun set over the desert, talking about their days or their dreams, or sometimes just existing together in comfortable silence. One evening, after Xander had spent the day mucking out the small barn and reinforcing the door, Adelaide made stew with vegetables from her struggling garden and the last of the salt pork she had been hoarding. They ate on the porch, the evening breeze providing relief from the day's heat, and Adelaide found herself studying Xander's profile as he looked out at the darkening landscape. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why are you really doing this? And do not say it is just because we are friends. I know there is more to it than that." Xander was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, he set his bowl aside and turned to face her properly. "Do you believe in second chances, Adelaide?" "I suppose that depends on what someone is getting a second chance at," she said carefully. "At doing the right thing." Xander's gaze was intense. "I told you about Rachel, about how she died. What I did not tell you was that I was supposed to be watching her the day she wandered off and drank from a contaminated water source. I was 16 and angry about the move west, sulking in my own self-pity, instead of taking care of my little sister like I was supposed to. By the time we found her, it was too late." "Xander," Adelaide said softly, her heart breaking for the pain in his voice. "I have carried that guilt for 5 years," he continued. "I have tried to be better, to help people when I can, but it never feels like enough. Then I saw you that day behind the saloon, so determined to learn to protect yourself, and something just clicked into place. I thought, here is someone I can actually help, someone who wants to be helped, who is willing to do the work. He met her eyes. So yes, we are friends. But you are also a second chance I never thought I would get. A chance to do right by a woman who reminds me of what Rachel could have become. Adelaide reached out and took his hand. You were 16 years old and dealing with your own pain. What happened to Rachel was not your fault. My head knows that, Xander said, but my heart has never quite believed it. Then maybe your heart needs better evidence, Adelaide said. You have spent the last month teaching me to shoot, fixing my property, making sure I am safe. You have done more for me than I had any right to expect from anyone. If that is not doing the right thing, I do not know what is. Xander looked down at their joined hands, his thumb moving in small circles over her knuckles. You make it easy, Adelaide. You are easy to help, easy to talk to, easy to be around. He raised his eyes to hers and she saw something new there, something that made her pulse quicken. Maybe too easy if I am being honest. What does that mean? Adelaide asked, though she thought she knew. It means I need to be careful, Xander said quietly, because somewhere along the way being your friend stopped feeling like enough. The air between them seemed to thicken. Adelaide knew she should pull her hand away, should laugh this off or change the subject or do any of the dozen things a proper lady would do when a man implied he had feelings for her. But she did not want to be proper. She wanted to be honest. Then maybe you should stop being careful, she said. Xander's breath caught. Adelaide, I cannot offer you much. I am just a cowboy with more ambition than capital. I do not have a homestead like yours, do not have savings to speak of. All I have is a strong back and a willingness to work. That is more than most men have, Adelaide said. More than Briggs with all his money and his threats. You have integrity, Xander. You have kindness. Those things matter more than capital. I am trying to do the honorable thing here, Xander said, but he had not let go of her hand. If anything, his grip had tightened. The honorable thing is to be honest about how you feel, Adelaide countered. So I will start. I look forward to seeing you more than I should. When you are here, this place feels less like a burden and more like a home. You make me laugh, and you make me feel capable, and you make me think maybe I do not have to do everything alone after all. She swallowed hard, gathering her courage. I care about you, Xander Frost, more than friends care about each other. For a moment, Xander did not move, did not even seem to breathe. Then he was standing, pulling Adelaide to her feet, his hands coming up to frame her face. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough. Because once I kiss you, Adelaide, I am not going to want to stop at just friends. I am going to want all of you. Then kiss me, Adelaide whispered, and stop being so careful. Xander kissed her like a man who had been holding back for too long, his mouth claiming hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Adelaide wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing closer, feeling the solid strength of him against her. The kiss deepened, and Adelaide tasted desire and promise, and something that felt remarkably like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. Then why did you wait so long? Adelaide asked. Because I wanted to be sure you felt the same way, Xander said. Because I did not want to be just another man taking advantage of a woman in a vulnerable position. Adelaide pulled back enough to look him in the eye. You could never be that. You are nothing like Briggs or any of the others who see me as something to be acquired. You see me as a person, Xander. As an equal. Do you have any idea how rare that is? You deserve to be seen that way, Xander said simply. You deserve to be respected and protected and cherished. Then cherish me, Adelaide said, rising on her toes to kiss him again. They stood on the porch until the stars came out, kissing and talking and making plans in low voices. Xander would continue to help with the homestead, But now, it would not be as just a friend or a hired hand. They would work the property together, building something that belonged to both of them. Xander would talk to his boss about adjusting his schedule even further, finding ways to spend more time at Adelaide's place. Eventually, if things went the way they both hoped, they would marry, combining their resources and their dreams. "I know people will talk," Adelaide said as Xander prepared to ride back to the Barrett ranch. "A woman living alone, a man coming and going. There will be assumptions." "Let them assume what they want," Xander said. He cupped her face in his hands, kissing her softly. "But if you would rather make this official sooner than later just to protect your reputation, I am ready whenever you are." Adelaide felt warmth bloom in her chest. "Are you proposing to me, Xander Frost?" "Not properly, no," Xander said with a crooked smile. "When I propose, you will know it. There will be flowers and eloquent words and probably me sweating through my best shirt because I will be so nervous. But I am letting you know that I am serious about this, about us. When the time is right, I am going to ask you to be my wife, and I am hoping you will say yes." "Then I will give you a hint," Adelaide said, smiling up at him. "The answer is already yes. It has been yes since you first showed me how to hold a pistol properly." Xander kissed her again, long and sweet, then swung up into his saddle. "I will be back on Thursday. Lock your doors and keep your pistol close." "I will," Adelaide promised, watching as he rode off into the darkness. She stood on the porch long after he disappeared, hugging herself and replaying every moment of the evening in her mind. The next few weeks passed in a haze of happiness. Adelaide continued working at the saloon, but now she had something to look forward to, someone waiting for her. Xander came to the homestead every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, working from afternoon until evening, always staying for dinner, always leaving with a kiss that made Adelaide's toes curl. They were careful to maintain propriety, never doing more than kissing, both aware that Adelaide's reputation was fragile enough without adding fuel to the gossip fires. But the kisses they shared were full of promise, hints of the passion they would explore once they were properly married. Adelaide met Xander's boss, Mr. Barrett, when he rode out to the homestead one Saturday to see what was keeping his best ranch hand so occupied. He was a gruff, older man with sharp eyes, but those eyes softened when he saw how Xander and Adelaide looked at each other. "So you are the reason Xander has been working twice as hard so he can leave early," Barrett said, shaking Adelaide's hand. "Good to finally meet you, Miss Hayes." "I apologize for monopolizing your employee's time," Adelaide said. Barrett waved this off. "Xander has earned the right to use his time however he wants. Lord knows he has put in enough hours for 3 men over the years." He looked around the property, taking in the improvements Xander had made. "You have got a good piece of land here. With proper management, it could be quite valuable." "That is what I keep telling her," Xander said, sliding an arm around Adelaide's waist. Barrett's eyebrows rose at the familiar gesture, but he did not comment. "Well, I will leave you to it. Xander, take Sunday off too. You have earned a break." After Barrett left, Adelaide turned to Xander with wide eyes. "He just gave you an extra day off. I have never heard of a rancher doing that." "Barrett is a good man," Xander said. "He knows I have been working myself to the bone for years. I think he is glad to see me taking an interest in something beyond the next cattle drive." He pulled Adelaide close, kissing the top of her head. "Besides, I think he approves of you. That is a rare thing. Barrett does not approve of much." With the extra day off, Xander was able to spend even more time at the homestead. They worked side by side, Adelaide learning from Xander's expertise, Xander learning from Adelaide's practical knowledge of the property. Together, they planted a vegetable garden that was more ambitious than anything Adelaide had managed alone. They repaired the barn roof, stopping for breaks where they would sit in the shade, passing a canteen of water back and forth and stealing kisses when the mood struck them. It was during one of these breaks that Xander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Adelaide's breath caught. "Xander!" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond set in the center. It was not extravagant, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "This was my mother's ring," Xander said. "She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to a woman worthy of it. Adelaide Hayes, you are the strongest, most capable, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You make me want to be better, do better. You make me believe that maybe I deserve a second chance at happiness." He slid off the hay bale and onto one knee, looking up at her with his heart in his eyes. "Will you marry me?" Adelaide could barely see him through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Xander slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a fierce joy that made Adelaide laugh against his mouth. They stayed in the barn for a long time, holding each other and making plans, imagining the future they would build together. They decided to marry quickly, partly for propriety's sake and partly because neither of them saw the point in waiting. They arranged for a small ceremony at the quartzsite church, inviting only a handful of people. Barrett and some of the ranch hands Xander was friendly with, the saloon owner who had been kind to Adelaide, a few neighbors from surrounding properties. Xander bought a new shirt and vest for the occasion, and Adelaide wore a simple cream-colored dress that she had been saving for a special occasion. The ceremony took place on a Saturday afternoon in early August, with the minister keeping things brief in deference to the heat. When he pronounced them husband and wife and Xander kissed her, Adelaide felt like her heart might burst from happiness. This man, this good and honorable man, was now hers, and she was his, and together they would face whatever came. They held a small celebration at the homestead afterward, with food and drinks provided by Barrett as a wedding gift. The Cowboys sang bawdy songs that made Adelaide blush and Xander laugh. And as the sun set, Adelaide found herself dancing with her new husband in the yard, his arms strong around her, his voice low in her ear as he told her all the ways he planned to love her. When the guests finally left, Xander swept Adelaide into his arms and carried her over the threshold of the little house that was now officially theirs. He set her down gently in the bedroom, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the buttons of her dress. "I have never done this before," Adelaide admitted, suddenly nervous. "Neither have I," Xander said, his smile tender. "So we will figure it out together." And they did, with gentle touches and whispered encouragements, with laughter when things did not go quite as planned and sighs when they did. Xander was patient and careful, making sure Adelaide felt nothing but pleasure, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, Adelaide understood for the first time what it meant to be truly known by another person, truly loved. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Xander tracing idle patterns on Adelaide's shoulder while she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," Xander said into the darkness. "I do not think I have said that yet, at least not properly." "But I do, Adelaide. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Adelaide whispered, pressing a kiss over his heart. "Thank you for finding me behind that saloon. Thank you for not walking away." "I could never walk away from you," Xander said. "You are stuck with me now, Mrs. Frost." Adelaide smiled at the sound of her new name. "I can think of worse fates." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Adelaide slept more soundly than she had in months, safe in the knowledge that she was no longer alone. The next few months brought both challenges and joys. Xander officially moved into the homestead, bringing his few possessions and his horse. Barrett adjusted his schedule so that Xander worked 3 days a week at the ranch and spent the rest of his time developing Adelaide's property. With Xander's help and knowledge, they were able to purchase a few head of cattle using Adelaide's savings from the saloon, the beginning of what they hoped would eventually become a proper herd. Adelaide continued working nights at the saloon 3 times a week, not willing to give up the steady income until they were more stable, but she no longer felt exhausted and overwhelmed. She had a partner now, someone to share the burden with. Briggs made one more attempt to acquire the property, showing up on a Tuesday afternoon with a new offer and a barely concealed sneer. But when Xander emerged from the barn, his presence solid and unmistakable, and Adelaide stood beside her husband with her hand resting casually on her pistol, Briggs seemed to deflate. "I see congratulations are in order," he said stiffly, his gaze moving between them. "They are," Xander said pleasantly. "Adelaide and I were married 2 months ago. This is our land now, and it is not for sale at any price." Briggs's mouth tightened. "You are making a mistake, both of you. This land is too difficult for a single couple to manage properly." "Then it is a good thing we are not a single couple, is it not?" Adelaide said sweetly. "We have each other. And that is more than you will ever have, Mr. Briggs, because money cannot buy loyalty or love or the will to work hard for something you believe in." Briggs looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Adelaide's expression, or maybe in Xander's steady gaze, made him think better of it. He turned on his heel and stalked away, and they never saw him again. Word filtered through town later that he had sold his own property and moved to California, chasing some other dream. Adelaide felt nothing but relief. As autumn arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular sunsets, Adelaide began to suspect that something wonderful was happening. She waited until she was sure before telling Xander, choosing an evening when they sat on the porch together, watching the stars emerge. "I have some news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Xander's eyes went wide, his expression cycling through shock, joy, and then a deep, abiding tenderness. "A baby? Adelaide, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be," Adelaide said. "I have missed 2 months now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." "I think it happened on our wedding night." Xander pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "This is the best news I have ever received," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to be parents." "Are you scared?" Adelaide asked. "Because I am terrified." "Terrified and thrilled in equal measure," Xander admitted. He pulled back to look at her, cupping her face in his hands. "But we will do this together, just like everything else. And this baby is going to be so loved, Adelaide, so incredibly loved." Tears spilled down Adelaide's cheeks. "We are going to be a family." "We are already a family," Xander corrected gently. "This baby is just going to make us bigger." They spent the evening talking about names and making plans, converting the small storage room off the main bedroom into a nursery. Xander became even more protective of Adelaide, insisting she cut back her hours at the saloon, taking on more of the heavy work around the homestead himself. Adelaide chafed at the restrictions initially, but had to admit she was tired more easily now, her body focused on the new life growing within her. The pregnancy was not easy. Adelaide dealt with constant nausea through the first few months, and as she grew larger, the Arizona heat became almost unbearable. But Xander was there through all of it, holding her hair when she was sick, fanning her when she was too hot, rubbing her swollen feet at the end of long days. He talked to her belly, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch in the desert, promising to teach them to ride and shoot, and everything else they would need to know. Winter brought cooler weather and Adelaide's growing belly. She finally stopped working at the saloon in December, her bulk making it too difficult to maneuver through the crowded room. The saloon owner gave her a generous parting gift and told her she would always have a job there if she needed it, but Adelaide hoped she would never need to go back. Between Xander's wages from the Barrett Ranch and the modest income from their small cattle herd, they were managing. It was not a comfortable life by any means, but it was theirs, earned through hard work and shared dreams. The baby came in late March, during a night of howling desert winds. Xander rode to fetch the midwife from town, his face pale with worry while Adelaide labored alone in the house, gritting her teeth through the pain. By the time they returned, Adelaide was certain she was going to die. The pain was so intense. But the midwife, a weathered woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Quartzsite, took one look at Adelaide and smiled. "You are doing fine, child," she said. "This baby is in a hurry to meet you, that is all." Xander held Adelaide's hand through the worst of it, murmuring encouragements and looking nearly as pale as she felt. When the baby finally emerged, wailing and perfect, the midwife cleaned him quickly and placed him in Adelaide's arms. "You have a son," she announced. Adelaide stared down at the tiny, red-faced creature in her arms, overwhelmed by the surge of love that washed through her. "A son," she whispered. "Xander, we have a son." Xander was crying openly, his hand gentle as he touched the baby's downy head. "He is perfect," he managed. "Adelaide, he is absolutely perfect." They named him James after Adelaide's father, and he was indeed perfect. He had Xander's whiskey-colored eyes and Adelaide's dark hair, and from the moment he was born, he had both of them completely wrapped around his tiny fingers. Xander proved to be a natural father, patient and attentive, getting up for night feedings even though he had to work the next day, pacing the floor with James when the baby fussed, singing cowboy songs in his rough voice until James fell asleep on his shoulder. Adelaide had never felt so exhausted or so happy. The days blurred together in a haze of feedings and diaper changes and stolen moments of sleep, but through it all, she could not stop marveling at what they had created. This tiny person, this perfect blend of her and Xander, was theirs to love and raise and teach. As James grew from a tiny infant into a chubby baby, the homestead grew with him. Xander and Adelaide added on to the house, building a proper second bedroom and expanding the kitchen. They increased their cattle herd slowly but steadily, Xander's expertise ensuring they chose good stock and managed them well. Adelaide planted a larger garden, growing vegetables they could sell in town along with feeding themselves. It was hard work, endless work, but it was also deeply satisfying. Barrett came to visit when James was 6 months old, bringing gifts for the baby and praise for what Xander and Adelaide had accomplished. "I have been thinking," he said as they sat on the porch, watching James gum enthusiastically on a wooden toy Xander had carved. "I am getting older and I do not have children to pass the ranch on to. When the time comes, I would like you to consider taking over as foreman, Xander. The job comes with a house and a percentage of the profits. It would give you more stability." Xander looked at Adelaide, a question in his eyes. She knew what he was asking. Did she want to leave the homestead, the place her father had built, for the security Barrett was offering? Adelaide looked around at the land they had worked so hard to improve, the house they had expanded with their own hands, the garden she had planted and tended. This place was part of her, tied up with memories of her father and dreams of her future. But it was also just land. Home was not a place, it was the people in it. "What would happen to the homestead?" she asked. "You could lease it to someone looking to start out," Barrett suggested. "Or sell it if you preferred. Either way, you would have options. Adelaide looked at Xander, seeing the hope in his eyes, the vision of a more secure future for their family. She looked at James, happily oblivious to the adult conversation, focused entirely on his toy, and she made her decision. "We would like to think about it," she said. "This is not a small choice." "Of course," Barrett agreed. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you are ready." That night, after James was asleep and they were lying in bed together, Adelaide and Xander talked through the options. The homestead would always be special to Adelaide, but she had to admit the practical advantages of Barrett's offer were hard to ignore. The foreman's house was larger and better maintained. The steady salary would give them financial security they did not currently have. And Xander would be doing work he loved, with the respect and authority he had earned. "What do you want?" Xander asked, his fingers threaded through hers. "I want our family to thrive," Adelaide said. "I want James to grow up with opportunities, to never feel the kind of worry I felt when I was trying to hold this place together alone. If that means leaving the homestead, then that is what we do." "But this place is important to you," Xander said. "You are important to me," Adelaide corrected. "You and James. The homestead is just where we started. It does not have to be where we stay." They decided to accept Barrett's offer, with the understanding that they would transition slowly over the course of a year. That would give Barrett time to train Xander in the administrative side of running the ranch, and give Adelaide time to prepare the homestead for lease or sale. In the meantime, they would continue as they had been, building their herd and their life together. When James was a year old, they held a small party at the homestead, inviting the friends they had made in Quartzsite and the surrounding areas. James toddled around on unsteady legs, delighted by all the attention, while Xander and Adelaide looked on with proud smiles. It struck Adelaide, watching her husband scoop their son into his arms and spin him around until James shrieked with laughter, how far they had come from that day behind the saloon. She had been alone then, scared and uncertain, trying to teach herself to defend a property she was not sure she could keep. Now she had a husband who loved her, a son who lit up their lives, and a future that felt full of possibility instead of dread. All because a cowboy had taken the time to help her, to see past her fumbling attempts at self-sufficiency to the determined woman underneath. Later that night, after the guests had left and James was asleep, Adelaide and Xander sat on the porch as they had so many times before. Xander's arm was around her shoulders and Adelaide leaned into him, comfortable and content. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. "If you had not walked behind the saloon that day, or if you had laughed at me instead of offering to help?" "I think about it all the time," Xander admitted, "and I thank God for every choice that led me to you." He kissed the top of her head. "You saved me, Adelaide. You gave me a reason to believe I could do something right, could be something more than a drifter with a guilty conscience." "We saved each other," Adelaide corrected softly. "I could not have survived out here without you." "Sure you could have," Xander said. "You are the strongest person I know, but I am glad you did not have to. I am glad we found each other." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, the desert night alive with the sounds of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. This was their life now, built from hard work and love and the simple choice to help a stranger. Adelaide thought about her father, hoped he could see how well she was doing, how the homestead he had left her had become the foundation for something even better. 2 years later, Adelaide found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. She continued working around the property as long as she could, with Xander fretting over her and James, now 3 years old, trying to help in his enthusiastic but largely ineffective way. They had moved to the foreman's house at Barrett Ranch the previous year, and Adelaide had to admit the larger space and better amenities made life with a toddler much easier. They had leased the homestead to a young couple newly arrived from Kansas, with an option to buy once they got established. It had been the right choice, Adelaide knew, even if a part of her would always miss the little house her father built. Their second son was born in October, during the brief cool season that passed for autumn in Arizona. They named him Samuel, and he was quieter than James had been, more observant with Adelaide's green eyes and Xander's strong nose. James was fascinated by his baby brother, constantly wanting to hold him and show him toys, and Xander joked that they would need to build an addition onto the house if they kept going at this rate. "Would you mind?" Adelaide asked, holding Samuel while James curled against her side, the perfect picture of domestic contentment. "Having a large family, I would love it," Xander said honestly. "Every child is a blessing, Adelaide, and I want our house to be full of laughter and noise and life." Adelaide smiled, her heart full. She had everything she had never dared to dream of: a husband who adored her, healthy children, a secure home, and work that mattered. The scared woman teaching herself to shoot behind a saloon felt like someone from another lifetime. The years that followed brought both expected challenges and unexpected joys. Barrett grew older and relied more and more on Xander, until Xander was running the ranch in all but name. Adelaide threw herself into raising their boys and managing the household, but she also found time to continue practicing with her pistol, wanting to maintain the skills Xander had taught her. She had not needed to defend herself since those early days, but she believed in being prepared. When James was 7 and Samuel was 4, Adelaide gave birth to their first daughter. They named her Rachel, after Xander's sister, and Xander cried when Adelaide told him the name she had chosen. Rachel had Xander's coloring and Adelaide's delicate features, and she was fierce from the moment she entered the world, howling her displeasure at being born and refusing to be soothed until Xander held her. "She knows her papa already," Adelaide said, smiling despite her exhaustion. "She is perfect," Xander said, staring down at his daughter with wonder. "They are all perfect. How did we get so lucky?" "Not luck," Adelaide said. "Love. We built this with love." Barrett passed away when Rachel was 2 years old, and to everyone's surprise except Adelaide's, he left the ranch to Xander in his will. There were distant relatives who could have inherited, but Barrett's will was clear. Xander Frost had been more of a son to him than his actual relatives had ever been, and he wanted the ranch to go to someone who would care for it properly. Xander and Adelaide suddenly found themselves landowners on a scale they had never imagined, responsible for several hundred head of cattle and a dozen employees. It was overwhelming at first, the sheer scope of responsibility. But they approached it the same way they had approached everything else, together. Adelaide proved to have a head for the business side of ranching, managing the books and negotiating sales with a sharp mind that impressed the buyers. Xander managed the day-to-day operations with the experience of someone who had been doing this work since he was a boy. Together, they built the Barrett Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the territory. As the children grew, Adelaide and Xander made sure to pass on their skills. James learned to ride almost before he could walk, and by the time he was 10, he could handle a rope and work cattle alongside the ranch hands. Samuel was quieter and more bookish, preferring to help his mother with the accounts, but he could hold his own in the saddle when needed. And Rachel, fierce little Rachel, demanded to be taught everything her brothers knew. Xander taught all 3 children to shoot, patient and thorough, and Adelaide watched with pride as her daughter's aim proved as true as her own. "She is you reborn," Xander said one evening, watching Rachel practice her draw. She was 12 now, all gangly limbs and determination, and she had just bested James in a friendly competition. "She is herself," Adelaide corrected, "but I am glad she will never have to be afraid the way I was." "None of our children will," Xander said firmly. "That is what we have given them, safety and skills and the knowledge that they are loved." Adelaide leaned against him, watching their children laugh and argue and exist in the easy way of siblings who were also friends. "We did all right, did we not?" "We did better than all right," Xander said. "We built something extraordinary." By the time Adelaide was 40, they had expanded the ranch significantly, purchasing adjacent properties as they became available, including, ironically, the land that had once belonged to Briggs. The original homestead, their homestead, was still leased to the same couple, now older and with children of their own. Adelaide visited sometimes, walking through the rooms that held so many memories, remembering the scared woman she had been and marveling at the confident rancher she had become. James grew into a capable young man, passionate about ranching and eager to learn everything he could about the business. At 21, he married a schoolteacher named Martha, and they settled into a house on the ranch property, beginning the cycle anew. Samuel surprised everyone by wanting to study law, and Adelaide and Xander sent him to San Francisco for his education, proud and a little sad to see him go. Rachel, at 18, was in no hurry to marry, despite numerous suitors. She worked the ranch alongside her father and brother, as skilled with cattle as any man, and Adelaide had never been prouder. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Xander arranged for the children to handle the ranch for a few days so he could take Adelaide back to Quartzsite. The town had grown over the years, but the Silver Dollar Saloon was still standing, though under new ownership now. They walked to the back of the building, to the spot where they had first met, and found it largely unchanged. Someone had painted the back wall and the fence posts were new, but the essential character of the place remained. "I stood right there," Adelaide said, pointing, "missing every shot and cursing my own incompetence." "And I stood over there," Xander added, "trying to decide if I should offer to help or mind my own business." "I am very glad you decided to help," Adelaide said, turning to face him. 25 years had left their marks, lines around Xander's eyes and silver threading through his dark hair, but he was still the handsomest man she had ever known. "You changed my entire life that day. We changed each other's lives," Xander said. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Adelaide's breath caught. "I know we are already married, have been for a quarter-century, but I wanted to give you this." He opened the box to reveal a new ring gold set with a circle of small diamonds. "The ring I gave you when I proposed was my mother's, and it was beautiful. But this one I bought with our money, earned from our ranch, and it represents everything we have built together." Adelaide let him slide the new ring onto her finger, where it nestled beside the original wedding band she had never taken off. "It is beautiful, Xander. You are beautiful," he said. "You are still the brave woman teaching herself to shoot, the stubborn homesteader who refused to give up, the loving mother who gives everything to our children. You are still Adelaide Hayes, even if your last name is Frost now." "Adelaide Frost," she said, testing the way it sounded. Even after all these years, it still made her smile. "I think I will keep the name." "I think you should," Xander agreed, pulling her close. They stood there behind the saloon in the spot where everything had begun, and Adelaide thought about all the choices that had led them here. The choice to keep fighting even when she was scared and alone. The choice to accept help from a stranger. The choice to open her heart to love even when it would have been safer to keep it closed. Every choice had been worth it, had led her to this moment, this man, this life. "What are you thinking about?" Xander asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "How grateful I am," Adelaide said, "for everything. For you, for our children, for every moment we have shared. I would not change a single thing." "Not even the hard parts?" Xander asked. "Especially not the hard parts," Adelaide said. "They made us who we are. They taught us to appreciate what we have." They stayed in Quartzsite for 3 days, revisiting old haunts and introducing themselves to new business owners who had heard stories about the couple who had started with nothing and built an empire. On their last evening, they sat on the porch of the small hotel where they were staying, watching the sun set over the desert that had been their home for so long. "You ever think about what comes next?" Adelaide asked. "James is ready to take over the ranch. Samuel will be coming back from San Francisco soon with his law degree. Rachel will eventually find someone worthy of her, settle down. Are you asking if I am ready to retire?" Xander said with a smile. "I am asking what you want to do with the rest of our lives," Adelaide clarified. "We have spent so long building something for the children. Maybe it is time to think about what we want just for us." Xander considered this, his gaze distant. "I would like to travel," he said finally. "See some of the places we have only heard about. Take you to San Francisco to visit Samuel, maybe go further north to Oregon, see what the land is like there." "I would like that," Adelaide said. "And then I would like to come home to the ranch and grow old with you, watch our grandchildren grow up, teach them to shoot the way you taught me." "That sounds perfect," Xander said. He took her hand, his thumb tracing over the new ring he had given her. "Whatever comes next, as long as we face it together, I know it will be good." And he was right. They did travel, taking a grand tour that lasted 6 months, visiting Samuel in San Francisco and exploring the Northern Territories. But they always came back to Arizona, to the ranch that was their legacy, to the family they had built. They watched James and Martha welcome 4 children, watched Samuel return from law school and establish a practice in Tucson, watched Rachel finally fall in love with a neighboring rancher's son and marry in a ceremony that rivaled their own for joy and celebration. Adelaide taught all her grandchildren to shoot, boys and girls alike, passing on the skills Xander had taught her so many years ago. She told them stories about their grandfather's patience and kindness, about how he had seen past her fumbling attempts to the capable woman underneath. She told them about the homestead and the hard work and the choices that had shaped their family. Xander, for his part, taught the grandchildren to ride and rope and work cattle. He was patient with them the same way he had been patient with Adelaide, never rushing, always encouraging. He told them stories about their grandmother's fierce determination and steady courage, about how she had refused to give up even when everything seemed impossible. Together, Adelaide and Xander became the heart of the family, the ones everyone turned to for advice or comfort or just the pleasure of their company. They grew old together, their bodies wearing down but their love remaining as strong as ever. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, they renewed their vows in a ceremony that had everyone crying happy tears. 50 years, Xander said in his speech afterward, his voice still strong despite his age. 50 years since I walked behind a saloon and found a woman teaching herself to shoot. I thought I was just offering to help with her aim. I did not know I was meeting the love of my life, my partner, my best friend. Adelaide Frost, you have made these 50 years the greatest adventure I could have imagined. Here is to 50 more. I do not think we have 50 more years left in us, Adelaide said with a laugh, standing beside him. But however many we have, I intend to spend them exactly like this. Surrounded by the family we created in the home we built, with the man who taught me that I did not have to be alone." She raised her glass. "To Xander, who steadied my aim and captured my heart. To our children and grandchildren, who make every day worthwhile. And to second chances, which sometimes come disguised as a cowboy offering shooting lessons." Everyone drank, and the party continued late into the night, music and laughter echoing across the ranch. Adelaide and Xander slipped away eventually, walking hand in hand to the small hill that overlooked the property. From here, they could see the lights of the houses scattered across their land, could hear the distant sound of cattle and the wind moving through the desert plants. "We did it," Adelaide said softly. "We built something that will last beyond us." "We did," Xander agreed. He pulled her close and they stood there together, two old people who had once been young and scared and desperate, who had found each other at exactly the right moment. "I love you, Adelaide. I have loved you since the moment you pointed that pistol at me with shaking hands and stubborn eyes." "I love you too," Adelaide said. "Thank you for offering to steady my aim." "Thank you for letting me," Xander replied. They stayed on that hill until the stars came out, the same stars they had watched on their wedding night, on the birth of each of their children, through hard times and good times and all the ordinary moments in between. And when they finally walked back to the house, they did so together, as they had done everything for 50 years, as they would continue to do for whatever time remained. The years that followed were gentle ones, full of quiet contentment. Adelaide's health began to fail in her mid-70s, her body finally succumbing to the hard work of all those years. Xander cared for her with the same patience and tenderness he had shown since the beginning, and Adelaide leaned on him without shame, comfortable in the knowledge that accepting help was not weakness but wisdom. On a warm spring evening, with the desert in bloom and the scent of flowers drifting through the open window, Adelaide passed away peacefully in her sleep, Xander holding her hand. The entire family gathered for the funeral, and the stories they told were of a woman who had been brave and stubborn and kind, who had built a legacy not just of land and cattle but of love and family, and the unshakable belief that people were stronger together than apart. Xander mourned deeply, but he did not break. He continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by the family they had created, telling stories about Adelaide to anyone who would listen. He lived for 5 more years, growing frailer but never losing the light in his eyes. On the anniversary of their first meeting, 56 years after he had walked behind the $silver saloon and offered to help a woman teach herself to shoot, Xander Frost passed away in his sleep, a smile on his face. They buried him next to Adelaide on the hill overlooking the ranch, and at the funeral, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren spoke of a love that had transformed 2 lonely people into a family, 2 small properties into a legacy, and a chance meeting into a lifetime of devotion. The ranch continued under James's management, then passed to his children, and then to theirs, each generation adding their own stories while honoring the foundation Adelaide and Xander had built. The tale of how they met, of the cowboy who had offered to steady a frightened woman's aim and found his soulmate in the process, became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that love often starts with a simple choice to help someone in need. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert wind blows just right, you can almost see 2 figures on that hill, standing close together, watching over the land they loved and the family they created, their love as eternal as the stars wheeling overhead in the Arizona sky.